You've learned about the ecological need for restorations of coastal ecosystems, and now in this video we'll look at the policy context for it. Which policies to keep in mind, what processes are in place, which goals do we have to achieve, and how the implementation of these policies work to make sure that we can improve the implementation of this process to actually achieve cross-border coastal restorations on a large scale. So, the ecological need for restorations is huge. We have a large global biodiversity crisis which needs to be addressed, and it's a problem too big for local authorities or even national authorities to implement on their own effectively. Therefore, we do need international cooperation, and this is done through policies as a conduit for these decisions, for the agreements to be made. And the policies can be elaborated on a bilateral level, so two countries agreeing to do something together. This can be, for example, done through trade agreements which have sustainability clauses in them. For example, country X agreeing to trade with country Y if they both stop deforestation. We can have groups or blocks of countries agreeing on policies, so European Union or the EU is one of the main blocs that do put out a lot of policies that bind the whole bloc of countries in the common goals. Or then finally we have global policies where most of the countries of the world agree to do something together. And these policies then define what should be done, by when, and to a certain extent also how. So in this module you will find a lot of information of the different key policies in the biodiversity conservation, restoration topics. I'll just run through the main ones for you to keep an eye out in general. And these ones are, some of them are global, the other ones will be EU related. So on a global level, we have a global biodiversity framework which was established as part of the Kunming-Montreal Protocol under the Convention on Biological Diversity, which commits all of the countries of the world to protect 30% of land and sea by 2030. And then there's similar policies also at the European level, for example, the Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, which commits to the same targets and adds a 10% strict protection target on top of it. The EU has also passed a nature restoration regulation, which commits the countries to 20% of all degraded habitats to be protected, to be restored and protected by 2030, and all of them by 2050. And then we have other more general policies such as the Sustainable Development Goals or the European directives such as the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, Habitats Directive, Birds Directive, Water Framework Directive, and many others. And what these policies create is a very comprehensive, if complex, framework of ambitions that we have to achieve in this decade or in the next few decades to reverse and stop the biodiversity losses and try to manage this global crisis. The problem becomes when we look at where we are now and how we are implementing these policies so far. So even in European Union, which is quite advanced and has a lot of environmental legislation, our seas are currently protected about 12%, which means that we have achieved the Aichi target for 2020, but we are 2/3 of the way away for the 2030 targets, and we're only at 1% strict protection, so, or even less in different seas, which means that we have still quite a long way to go in the 5 years that we have left. And this by itself is not surprising. We as humanity have not been great in achieving environmental targets so far. So while some have been achieved in certain regions of the world, such as the Aichi targets that we just mentioned, most of them have not been. Even on the EU level, the good environmental status, good ecological status of marine waters, the favorable conservation status of protected species and habitats have not been achieved by the agreed deadline of 2020. Partly because these policies are established by defining top-down ambitions, and then the local and national authorities have to struggle to try to implement them. And I'm not saying that we do not need the policies or that we don't need high ambitions. The problem is more in how we get to implementing them in the end. And we do need to get closer to more socio-ecological transformations, which will require greater involvement of people, of authorities, of different stakeholders in the process from the start, to get to the point where we can effectively implement all of these policies across a larger area and to upscale these approaches. So the rest of this course will look into these approaches and how we can potentially do that, while on this module itself you can find more information on the policies, which ones to look out for and which processes to be aware of.